Deputy Carol McNeill.
Thank you, Lascan Corla. Last night I sat still writing these words and struggling for what to say to describe this report of the women who went before me and us and the lives that they lived and the lives of their children. And I fought with the words until my small son came and kissed me goodnight in his pyjamas. And I knew then the only way to approach this trauma of motherhood was to speak in that way, and to speak to the women who had had their babies taken from them and beg forgiveness. To speak to the women excluded by every aspect of our society with zero protection from the state, and hang my head in shame on behalf of that state. To really think about the loss of the children, the many, many children lost through death, through not knowing where they were buried or how, to going to the nursery to feed a baby and find him gone, and to acknowledge at this remove and in this inadequate way the unbearable and unrelenting trauma of those losses. Of all of the report and discussion since, one image sticks with me beyond all else. That is the scream. Described best, I think, by Terry Harrison on RTÉ Primetime last week, the scream when she went back to the nursery to find her 5-week-old baby, Dáil, gone. And she described the scream of the other girls there and how they all knew that that meant another baby gone. There are women today among us who know that scream also, for different reasons. The loss of a child, the guttural, animalistic scream that comes with the loss of a child. But many of those now who know that scream will also know love and care, will know arms wrapped around them in comfort at their loss. They will know the support of their partner or family, the care perhaps of a psychologist or counsellor to help them find that first blurry steps through their indescribable grief. But the women and girls of the mother and baby institutions knew no such kindnesses, no support, nothing to help, nothing but abuse and exclusion and exile, and that was at best. Because we know now, as we have known before, these women and young girls were so condemned. I have heard them described this week again as second-class citizens, but I don't buy that. Married women in Ireland were second-class citizens, mothers who happened not to be married. And I say this meaning not one iota of disrespect to the survivors, but simply to say it as it is. They were not even second-class citizens. Stripped of their very names sometimes, and given house names, they were a caste apart. They were untouchable, even by their own parents. As from chapter 12 of the report, in Ireland it's a sin you pay for all your life. For that was the law of this land, the unwritten rules of the squinty windows and respectable walk to church of a Sunday, the language used by parents to their children. If we had heard you had cancer, it would have been easier to accept. These are not the words of anything but exclusion. But do we really think that these thoughts and these ideas were independently formed? Or that the many of these families didn't bear their own long scars from the forced exiling of their girls? Who told them how to think? There is only one true answer. Yes, there were instances of bravery and instances of generosity and kindness and goodness within families and to the girls of other families. And yes, there were good people everywhere, some of whom bravely spoke up or acted differently. But when the social custom was to step off the street and let the priest pass, or to step on the grounds of a Protestant church being a mortal sin, when the church dictated every morality, every thought, every action, every cabinet meeting for a substantial period of this state, it is truly hard to look at our grandparents and blame them entirely, instead of the dogma of the dominant church and the state that should have guarded against it, instead of completely facilitating and legitimising it. But neither do I accept that the society had no role. People in towns knew these homes existed and ignored it as well. Decent Irish people knew these things happened and decided it was okay or necessary to ignore it. Yes, a priest-ridden society told them to, or told them to denounce it, but it was nothing to do with them. But as we look around and we wonder how it could have happened, we do have to look especially at the state. The very essence of the state, the constitutional democracy, is to protect the vulnerable individual from the tyranny of the majority. It was a plain fact that religious and social dogma was enabled by many political representatives, though not all, and by the bodies of the state who knew that was happening and failed to act to protect the women and girls and their children. But we can respond. The first response is the need for strong legislation on the right to information and identity for adoptees, a basic right, a basic right. We already recognise the fundamental right to identity in our approach to assisted human reproduction, and we know the constitutional Dáil has moved before and can move again. Other responses, as the Minister has said, full acknowledgement of the real experiences of survivors, appropriate memorialisation, financial recognition, crucially help for many of those with trauma. And finally, and linked, we do have to look today at what we're doing that we know is wrong. We're not immune from our own mass hysteria, and it's also easy to stand here and cast judgment on the past. We have to look ourselves up and down as well. For example, we can work to find meaningful, and I mean creative and therapeutic, access between children in long-term state care and their parents. Acknowledge that our system of direct provision is wrong and that it's contributing to trauma, and it's damaging parent-child relationships, thereby subjecting parents to unwarranted restrictions. I could also mention our ongoing failure in relation to a national education strategy for travellers. But you know, today is not properly about those things. It's about the people who survived. It's about the mothers and their children. Today is about hearing their scream, acknowledging their hurt, our wrongs, asking for their forgiveness. Finally, following in my colleague John Lahart's comments about the church, I wasn't going to say this today, but I do think it's important. The timidity of the state in the face of the church has ended, but not its interdependence. This week I had a pregnant lady contact me, really upset about this report and upset that the maternity hospital she attends is still linked to the sisters who used to run it. When a woman is sitting vigil by her child in intensive care is approached by a chaplain, not a counsellor, and parents today now have to fight for admission for their second child to a local school, not with the department, but with the Archdiocese. Today we began our proceedings in the Parliament direct, we beseech thee, O Lord. I mean no disrespect to anybody of the church or anybody practising in the church, but we do need to have a hard look at this interdependence and the delivery of state services by the church. Thank you.